was once a king with a dream to live in a palace made of gold. His name was King Midas, and he loved gold more than anything in all the world, even more than he loved his daughter, who was beautiful and kind and gentle. She would sit with him at night as he sat and counted out his money, and she would read to him while she stroked her cat. One night they were doing this when there was a knock at the door. The princess went to the door and she opened it, and there on the doorstep was a man, a black eye, blood dripping out of his nose. "Please help me," he said. His clothes were torn. The princess asked him in. She sat down and she began to see to his wounds. She gave him chicken soup. King Midas took his money, pulled it to one side. "I suppose you can stay," he said, "but don't come near my gold." So the man stayed, and the princess nursed him better for 10 days, until he was well enough to go on his way. Now, unbeknownst to King Midas and the princess, this man was a servant of the great god Dionysus, and Dionysus was pleased with Midas. So one night, when Midas was counting out his money, Dionysus appeared before him. "Hello," he said. "Hello, Midas. I am Dionysus, and I have come to give you a gift of one wish. Anything you want." Midas looked up at the god and thought about it. Anything he wanted. He wanted a chest full of gold, or a room full of gold, or 10 rooms full of gold, or maybe he could finally have a palace made of gold. He looked up at the god, and he was just about to say this when another little idea sprung into his head. Why ask for a palace of gold when he could ask for the power to make 10 palaces made of gold? He looked up at Dionysus and he said, "I wish for everything I touch to turn to gold." Dionysus tutted, and he looked down at the greedy king. "Are you sure?" he said. Midas looked up. "Yes, I'm sure. That's what I want. You said I could have anything." So Dionysus made it happen, just like that. The next morning, Midas woke up in bed. He reached out and he touched his bedside table, and it turned to gold. He touched his bed, and it turned to gold. He jumped out because it wasn't very comfortable anymore, and he touched a lamp, and it turned to gold. A rug, and it turned to gold. A mirror, and it turned to gold. He ran out of his bedroom, touching the door as he went, and it turned to gold. When he went down the staircase, he touched the banister, and the whole thing turned to gold. He went into the kitchen, and he touched the fridge door, and the whole fridge turned to gold. He opened it up and took out an apple, and that turned to gold. He couldn't eat it or to throw it away, but it didn't matter because he was having so much fun. He went into the garden and he reached out and touched one of his rose bushes, and it turned to gold. A butterfly fluttered by and he turned it to gold. A caterpillar turned to gold, and then he saw a cat and he reached down and he touched that, and that turned to gold. He was having so much fun, and he turned around and looked at his palace. "I wonder," he thought, "I wonder." And he walked up to his palace, and he placed both hands in front of the palace, closed his eyes, reached forward and touched it. And when he opened it, the whole palace had turned to gold. Midas jumped in the air and punched it. He was so happy he had a palace made of gold, what he had always wanted. So he went into his kitchen to try and eat again. He reached out and got a glass and he put it to his lips, but it turned to gold, and the liquid turned to gold, so he couldn't eat or drink anything, it seemed. Perhaps this wasn't such a good idea, he thought, but never mind. He would go and turn more things to gold, and I'm sure that would get rid of all the hunger pains. So he went into the garden and he heard a crying. When he looked down, he saw his daughter bent over her cat, which had turned to gold, her favourite thing in all the world. He had turned to gold. He reached down to comfort her and apologise, and as he reached out and touched her, his daughter turned to gold. Midas realised what he had done. He fell to his knees. He put his hands together and he looked up at the heavens. "Dionysus, please," he said, "please, take this away. Give me back my daughter." Dionysus had been watching this whole thing play out from Mount Olympus, and he had been wondering how long it would take, so he appeared before Midas. "Ah, Midas, should have wished for something else, shouldn't you?" he said, and he told Midas how to get rid of the golden touch. Midas looked down at his daughter. She was solid gold. He reached down and tried to pick her up, but he couldn't pick her up. He pulled her, pushed her, 1, 2, 3, bit by bit. He inched her down, a mile down to the river. When he got to the river, he pushed her in the river, and the gold was washed away by the water. The princess could breathe again. She got out of the river and dried herself off and looked at her father. "What are you going to do?" she said. Midas looked at his hands. He could see the gold glimmering out of them. He looked at his daughter. He thought about the hunger pains in his stomach. And then with a deep sigh, he walked into the river. He put his hands into the river, and the water washed away his golden touch. He went home that night with his daughter, and from that moment on he was always very, very careful what he wished for.